In today's podcast, I am joined by Jesse May, renowned poker player, commentator and novelist, and more recently the head of strategy at the Matchbook betting exchange. Welcome on board, Jesse.
Thanks, Pete. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. We're going to be spending some time talking about your work at Matchbook, the ins and outs of running a betting exchange. But first of all, I want to talk about you, your work in the betting space. You're one of I think the second guest I've had on with his own Wikipedia page.
I thought you were going to say I'm one of the oldest guests you ever had on, which I'm sure is true too, because I've been full into gambling since just around the age of 17. So like over 30 years, well over 30 years.
Yeah, so a lot of experience there. And I wanted to ask you about what got you started, because obviously from what I could read, not just from Wikipedia, it was straight from school.
Look, I think the only thing about having a Wikipedia page is that you learn to never believe anything you read. But also there's a caveat, never believe anything you hear either. So, who knows what I'm going to say. But what got me into gambling? I mean, it was Las Vegas. I got obsessed with poker when I was quite young, started taking some trips out to Las Vegas, and I just was hooked, not by the gambling and the game as much as the people. I was absolutely entranced from an early age with gambling people, with people who could specifically the subset of people who were making a living at gambling, right? Finding angles. Yeah. People who were back now, even today, being a professional gambler, trying to win at gambling is a bit on the outside. But back in the 80s, it was, totally loony. And if you wanted to make a living at gambling, if you wanted to play poker legally, Las Vegas was the only place in America you could basically play. By the time, 7-8 years later, after first started going to Vegas, you could play poker in, 20, 25 states in America legally. So there was a massive gambling boom as far as legal poker play, which was really the main sort of legalized betting. Sports betting was also only in Las Vegas, but that really didn't get widespread until the last couple of years, contrary to over here in the UK.
Yeah, I see. And then you started to make a living from playing poker and then latterly more commentating on it. Is that right?
Yeah, it was a long process, but I played a lot in those days, a lot of traveling, where there was Las Vegas, and when they legalized poker at Foxwoods, I was there. When they legalized poker in Atlantic City, I was there. Came over to Europe to play. So yeah, did all that and followed the tour and followed the curve. Now, I was kind of out of poker by the time it really started to get popular. And I was sort of on the other side of the table by then. I was more into the commentating, the writing, the content, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because you're a novelist as well about poker.
That's also a long time coming. But yeah, that's, I'd say, my biggest achievement in the eyes of my mother, because being a professional gambler was a little hard for her circle to take. But I did get a review in the New York Times. So then I was settled. I could do what I want. Yeah, my book, that's a long time ago now. I love to write, but I also have a hard time doing it. But I do love it.
Yeah. So it all sets the scene for your work at Matchbook, really, because you've got this vast experience working in so many different arenas of betting. And I was going to ask you about your betting yourself these days. Are you somebody who actively bets and plays poker? Or what's your involvement outside of just working at Matchbook?
I've been in action every day since the age of 18. I'm always in action. But in terms of sports betting, right, I don't do it that much now. Specifically because of price, right? I live in a place where it's very hard to get best price. There's a bunch of legal sports books and there's even an exchange in Denmark, but on that exchange, I would pay 8%. Wow. I've been shut down at so many places over the years. And so, for me, it's all about, if you're going to gamble seriously, if you're going to try and have a winning strategy, finding best price and finding the right angle is so important. So I still do some sports betting, but I'll take it on a different level. I do it because I want to make sure I still know what's going on or have a little fun. But I'm not doing it right now to make money, simply because I don't have right now those avenues to get the kind of price you need and the liquidity you need to get the bets down right now. Could I? Yeah, it's just there's, I think, other angles, other propositions that I'd be more interested in at the moment. Mm-hmm. But if I lived in the UK and had access to Matchbook, could play there, that would be a different story.
Yeah, of course. I think you're always going to have, from my own experience as well, you're always going to have an interest in betting, but you obviously you are limited by your circumstances, your experience of where you live, and all these kind of different things that are going on, and even restrictions, etc. these days that impact so many punters.
Oh, everything. It's hard. Like, there's a lot of people, like, I know tons of gamblers, and I've been in parts of my life very heavily involved in sports back in the noughts and that kind of thing. But you're always saying, oh, it's not like it was in the old days. It's not like it was. And I think in gambling, when people do that, it's not just that it was better in the old days, but they kind of attach to a particular situation where they were onto a winner, onto a winning situation. And a lot of, if you really want to make money in gambling, there's this, you got to find the angle, you got to find the winning strategy, and then you've got to rinse and repeat. You got to keep doing it.
Yeah.
But at some point, things change. And the successful gamblers are the ones who understand that the criteria has changed, the conditions have changed. If you don't adapt or stop doing that particular thing, what looked like a winning proposition is suddenly not that anymore.
Yeah. And that's been the case for poker, certainly, over the years, because so much has changed in that side of things. And not just that, but I definitely do hear that from other gamblers, is that constant evolution. So what works for a year, 2 years.
Poker's an incredible example of that. You can say I was a professional poker player. I definitely found the good situations to make money at, but I was never really that technically good at the game. I was very interested in everything around the game, finding the best games, finding the best angles. And honestly, when poker started in the UK, but also when it started in the US and really got big, people were terrible. The skill level was terrible. There was real opportunity there to make money. And there came a point when it was much tougher. I mean, now the game is solved, not completely solved, and that's a big statement. But in a lot of elements, the game has come on so much that in order to win at poker, you really, really have to have a much different approach than the one I had back 20 years ago. That goes for all kinds of gambling. That goes for every kind of sports betting, no matter what you do.
Yeah, it's very true. I've had a few guests on who asked them how they got involved, and they said they were often taking on American poker players when they were drunk on a Friday night, Saturday morning.
That's actually
just taking the easy money.
That is a great angle. There's so much that's always it's never simple. You always have to, there's a lot of gray, but there's always a lot of angles. And I look at every kind of gambling proposition the same. I'll never turn it away or say if it could or couldn't be. Sometimes you have to try it out. But I mean, I've seen crazy stuff in terms of people that can make money at things that you would never, ever believe, whether it's slot machines or blackjack. I ran around for a while with who I think is the one person in the history of the world who found a method for beating Pai Gow, which is, it's impossible, but he did it. And I don't want to go into it, but you see crazy things. So for me, it's not about that you can win at, that you can't. You really have to know how to size up propositions as a professional gambler. And I think, a lot of the people you've had on, certainly a lot of the customers we have at Matchbook, everybody comes with, a lot of people have a strategy. They have a betting strategy, whether they're using an exchange as part of that betting strategy, with other sports books, or they have an angle on a sport or something where they can, make money at the exchange. We understand those kinds of people. Those are the kinds of people that we know want to use an exchange and want to come on to Matchbook. And then, look, I've known those guys all my life. I think I have an advanced degree in every kind of, whether it's a thief, a hustler, a cheat, or just someone looking for an edge. It's neither good nor bad. There's a lot of, you have to size up everything individually. Now, I believe, because I've been on the end of, in my early part of my career and everything, in the wild west of regulation, right? Where honestly, you don't know if you're getting paid. You don't know if you're getting cheated. You think there's a good thing going on. And that was my experience for a long time, certainly in poker, right? Certainly in every kind of poker, whether it was in a casino or not. And I do now tend to believe that, the best way forward for gambling is in a regulated environment for a lot of reasons. But number one, game integrity and money security. To me, because everything else is small stakes, right? Everything is quite really penny ante if you don't know if you're getting paid and if you don't know if the game's on the square, if you don't know you're being protected. I know there's a lot of stuff, I know it's the talk. I listen to Neil Channing all the time. I listen to the guys. I know the talk about the UKGC. And there's, a lot of fair things about it. A lot of good points made. You could say there's some hypocritical stuff. It's all worth discussion. But at the end of the day, I do believe that regulation for sports betting provides the best way forward for people who really want to do it seriously.
No, I'd agree. I feel like the regulation really only works though if it's enforced, and that's probably
Well, also if it's fair to everybody and if it takes everything to account, yeah.
yeah, and that's where we're at the moment. I feel like I'm really looking forward. We'll probably talk about this in a little bit more. Looking forward to hopefully the white paper and the changes that might come in, fairness and increased transparency for both operators and punters alike. But let's go back to Matchbook because we talked about that. But for those people, maybe there's some people that are not familiar with what Matchbook offers. Do you want to explain what it is you offer and maybe as well the countries that you're actually available in?
Well, 66 or more percent of our customers are UK and Ireland. We are heavily focused on the UK. We think the UK right now, there's the most people who want to use an exchange, know how to use an exchange, have a need for an exchange, and we can provide the best one. But what we're about, and I've been sort of involved tangentially with Matchbook probably since 2010, right? But working full time for the last 7 years here. We've evolved as to what we're about and what we deliver. But for the last few years, we're really just focused on best price and deepest liquidity. That's what we are about. We're trying to provide the environment where you will find the best price, you will find the best liquidity. It's not easy getting that together because the exchange is a living organism, right? But I love that challenge. Now, I was in the exchange space, way back when. I was a customer of World Sports Exchange in the 90s, which I think was the first ever betting exchange. But then obviously when Betfair started, and there's been so many different ways that an exchange has run, so many different revenue models, so many different ways to treat their customers, so many different ways to do the ecosystem. I don't think it's been cracked yet, right? I don't think that anyone has shown for a betting exchange what the perfect is. But I think that at Matchbook, we have the passion to try and get there, and we're closer than we've ever been before.
So the big challenge with an exchange is obviously volume and liquidity. Now, that's the chicken and egg, isn't it? Because you can't get liquidity without customers, but you can't get customers without liquidity. And I know Betfair obviously have customers, and I know they're losing a little bit of market share, but they still have that liquidity. Smarkets, from what I understand, they have their own trading arm. I think it's called Hansen. So if you're betting on Smarkets, you're probably betting against Smarkets or taking bets and lays against them. How does Matchbook solve that riddle from your side of the thing? How are you getting in liquidity and customers at the same time to try and drive that volume?
Everything you said is correct. I look at it like a dual proposition, okay? And the dual proposition that I look at for an exchange in order to make it work is that, yes, you want to be the place where the most number of customers can access the best price and deepest liquidity. But you also need to be the place where if you have a specialty, if you're one of the best traders out there, if you have the best pricing model, if you have the best software for being able to operate and post liquidity on an exchange, then Matchbook also has to be the best place for you to monetize that model, for you to get the liquidity down. And the reason is like, and I see it a lot I know there's a lot of new exchanges starting up, and people look at Betfair, which exploded because nothing like it had come before. But what I think we found, or at least I found, and I didn't realize this when I came in, is that most people, when you say what's an exchange, right? What makes an exchange different from a sports book? It's probably two things. Number one, you see the liquidity that you can take, and you can take it. You can't get knocked back on a bet. If the liquidity is there at the price, you can take it. And the second thing that makes an exchange special is the ability to post up and off. If there's not a price there you want, you can post up and you can say, I want it at this price. Now, I think we found over the years is that over 95% of the people are much less interested in the second one and much more interested in the first. And the reason is because if you do it right, if you get liquidity together in the right way, if it's posted the right way, then you're talking about a margin that is so thin, you couldn't get a mouse's whisker through it, right? So you don't need to post. You just want to be a taker of when you want it. And so in order to do that, you need to have market makers. And we have relationships with not one, not two, but a dozen or more different market makers who all could be specialists in one area. And we try and balance out enabling them to post liquidity on an exchange with the customers who need it.
Yeah. So you have to deal with those high volume customers and incentivize them and encourage them to come onto Matchbook to help provide that liquidity. So the majority of people that are coming in and wanting, maybe they're laying off free bets or whatever it might be that people are actually doing, to actually be able to take their small chunk of price.
Yeah. Whatever they're doing. I mean, there's so many different reasons to use an exchange. When Matchbook, I guess when I first got involved with Matchbook, we were really known as a place, and we had a commission, kind of a charging structure that catered to that. It was all about position taker. I want to have X $1,000 on the Orioles at the best price. I want to bet one side of that, and I want to do that in one lump. We were kind of about that. Now we understand more that there's a lot of people who use an exchange because they want to trade markets. They want to bet and play. They want to hedge off. They want to take, they want to Dutch. There's so many different kinds of people and kinds of betting behaviors. And at Matchbook, like, I'd like to think that it's not that we are looser or accommodating people with different rules in other places, but we understand what people are doing, that they have different betting strategies. And because of that, we're able to accommodate them. Like specifically when you talk about the affordability rules, the source of wealth rules, all those checks, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know for a fact, but I would wager heavily that Matchbook has a higher percentage of their customers who would count themselves as a professional type gamblers than any other operation. That's because, not just because we have best price and deepest liquidity, which is important to a lot of those people. And so I think that's one reason, but also because we understand what these kind of people, what different people's situation is, how they have to declare their income, show their wealth, show that they can afford to gamble under the rules, which we absolutely follow.
Let's talk about those rules, because I think it would be remiss of us not to talk about what happened for you guys in 2020. I know that comes up now whenever you look at Matchbook or you see it on social media. It's a concern for people. Do you want to explain what happened and then what's transpired since then?
It was a hard time. I think we were a little bit behind the curve of the changing regulations. Right now, probably the rest of the world is behind the curve to what the UK has done.
Yeah.
But we had problems with our AML policies, with our source of wealth, how we looked for affordability, how we the process for those customers. When we became aware of the failings, we put a roadmap in place to fix everything, but it didn't come in time. And so back in February 2020, we were suspended until we could show that we'd gotten everything fixed and gotten the processes in place. Now, we had to recommit ourselves. Like it was a tough time. And we had to decide, do we want to be here? Does Matchbook really want to be in the UK? And we absolutely did. This is where we want to be. And one of the reasons is because we actually, when you start to think about it, what we wanted to do with Matchbook and what we believe is that there's a lot of advantages to being in this tightly regulated space, okay? And the advantages come with being absolutely compliant, right? So we can take on people who really want to gamble high for big sums of money, whether it's corporate, whether it's someone who's a professional. And we also, want people to feel that their money is not only safe, but that they're gambling in a pool where it is totally regulated and they're gambling against money that is totally safe, totally legal, and comes from the right place. We didn't only try and get our processes up to scratch. We think we went overboard, not overboard. We went, we feel like we're kind of the gold standard now. We got high protection. We never ever had a problem with paying customers. Nobody ever, as far as I know, had a complaint about not getting paid. When we got shut down, everybody got paid. But we know that customers want it. And, high protection, I think, is important. What is it, like 10% or less of the...
Very few, I think yourselves, I think markets are maybe high protection as well from the exchange side. But in terms of the big operators, yeah, few and far between. It's more common for them to have little or no protection than high.
Yeah, so what does it mean? It means that it's not just about the reputation. It's about, your money's being held in a trust, right, where you absolutely are going to get it no matter what happens. And I have, I'm not going to mention the names, but I have been stiffed by some firms who wouldn't in a million years have imagined that it would happen, or gotten slow paid, or had a bad deal against me. I think it's important, and I see a future where the betting exchange is the anchor of a worldwide market, like a financial exchange, like the stocks, where the prices of the sporting events, you can confidently bet them the same way that a hedge fund would bet on the price of oil. And I think that when you look at what's going on in the different markets in the US and stuff like that, that those worldwide anchors are needed. And so where's it going to happen? It's going to happen in a regulated market. It's going to happen at a betting exchange where there's a low margin. Margin is everything, right? Margin is everything. We're all about low margin.
Yeah, and more competition obviously means more lower margins. But I want to circle back as well back to what happened in terms of how you're viewed now by the regulator, which is the Gambling Commission. Are you on probation? Do you have to? People are interested. Are there concerns for anybody opening a Matchbook account now that there's potential issues with the licensing or operation from your side of things?
I'd say quite the contrary, right? While obviously it's unusual to get suspended, I'd say it's even more unusual to get your license back. And to do that, we had to absolutely totally open up and show that our processes, our compliance, our standards were, second to none. So yeah, we have regular reviews like everyone else by the Gambling Commission. You have audits, they ask questions. We're continually trying to make sure that we're improving. But in terms of our status right now, come check us out. We're high protection. I think have the best standard that can be.
Yeah, I have to ask because that's the questions that people do have, and it's important. And it makes sense, the fact that it's not something easy and cheap to, like you say, to retain, to get your license reinstated. It'd be very easy. We've seen companies leave the UK because maybe I'm not sure if they got the license suspended, but the cost of doing business in the UK was prohibitive to them versus the benefit of it. Whereas yourselves, you obviously see a clear future and you put that time and effort in to go, yeah, do you know what? We want to come back. We want to fight back against this and show to people that we're going to do things better. And people should still go in and use Matchbook. Yeah,
and look, reputation's a funny thing. I've been in gambling a long time, and you have to build reputations. You have to build trust. But we have heard, like anecdotally, I think there's a lot of people out there who anecdotally in their head, I wouldn't even say it's suspension, but kind of have an idea about what Matchbook is and what you can do on Matchbook from years ago. We've been in this space since 2010. And when they've come over lately, tried us out, they said, oh my God, I can't believe what's going on here. Look at your markets. You can join Matchbook now and you get 0% for 90 days. So I think that it's the kind of thing you should try out and see. When it comes now to horse racing, when it comes to greyhounds.
Yeah, talk about the markets. Let's talk about the best markets and where you've got some really good tight margins and great volume. Because I think, you've got NFL, soccer, football for Europeans. And you're in Europe now, Jesse. It's football.
Sorry, did I see? Yeah. Well, did you interview AK Anthony Kaminskis?
Yeah. Yes, I did.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of his, and I saw he had a tweet the other day where he said his son is saying soccer instead of football, and I'm already considering putting him up for adoption or something like that. But yeah, that's my American, and that's not the only one. I'm probably horrible with some of my gambling lingo, sports lingo in a lot of ways. Look, we have data, and you can see for yourself that, when it comes to racing and greyhounds and soccer and particularly U.S. sports, we're better than Betfair. Our prices, they are there. You come in an hour, 2 hours to kick off in any league, the derivative markets, you get action. You're going to find the best price and you're going to be able to get whatever size bet down you want.
Yeah, I remember looking a little while back at some of the, Asian handicap markets. And I know people talk about, from the UK and Ireland, I know that's the majority of customers saying, oh, you can't bet with Pinnacle. And that's quite right. You can't unless you go through some grey area operators. But I find you can often get the same prices that are on Pinnacle just on Matchbook. And maybe you're going to get a tick different here and there. And obviously a commission to factor in. But generally, you're getting really competitive Pinnacle style odds on some of these really liquid markets.
I know a lot about Pinnacle from way back in the day, and they're a fantastic operation. But we would like to think, and I believe that Matchbook is where you can get Pinnacle prices in a regulated environment if you're from the UK, right, and still get the regulations. And yeah, I think we're absolutely better than Pinnacle when it comes to something like baseball or NFL.
Yeah.
We also have like a brokerage service for people who don't see the volume on the exchange for the size bet that they want. And we have a lot of counterparties out there not matching us. And people come in and put out a quote and find the best price. And we're seeing telephone numbers sometimes if that's what the person wants. And we've got the counterparties that'll give a quote for it.
That's good. Yeah. I know. I was going to ask you about commission rates as well, because that's always a debate when it comes to exchanges. And obviously, the more competition, the more perhaps they will go down. All the main exchanges have slightly different approaches. Can you explain what Matchbooks is? And I was also going to talk, I know you've got a premium charge of sorts, but I was listening to another podcast and you gave the impression that it's not, if you trigger that, it's not a definite that you're going to get charged this higher rate. It's just there to make sure that fairness works across the way. If you're taking a lot out but not putting much in, then you might get a higher charge, but the opposite applies.
We're not picking out winners, right? I look at it, we're an ecosystem. And, this is probably coming from poker, which is also an ecosystem. And in an ecosystem, you need all kinds, but everybody has to be sort of charged appropriately in order to keep everything going. But in terms of like a premium charge, in terms of, a winner's punishment, that's not what we're doing. We're looking at the ecosystem and we're looking at people who are disrupting it. People who are, if you're somehow preventing everyone else from getting a fair shake, whether it's an angle that's not a level playing field, whether it's behavior that prohibits liquidity coming up for everyone else. It's like a nightclub, right? It's like if Matchbook was a nightclub and one guy's we want it to be open for everybody to have a good time. But if someone's in there smashing plates and glasses, you got to have a quiet word and say, if you're going to keep smashing the plates and glasses, we're going to have to charge you for them. But frankly, there's glass all over the floor as well. It's not that simple. And do we get it right all the time? There's a lot of people who are smarter than me. We haven't seen everything. I haven't seen everything, seen a lot, but you need to take things on a case-by-case basis and guide yourself by the principles of what you're trying to do, which is be a place where the most number of people can get on and there's liquidity there.
It's a good analogy, really, with that. I remember I was thinking of listening to Andrew Black. There was a podcast of him talking about when he started to drift away from Betfair. I don't know if you heard his chat. I think it's a Risk of Ruin podcast.
No, but I'm a fan. Like, I certainly knew him back in the day.
AK put me onto it as well. So, and he talks about, and it was when the premium charge was floated, he was kind of outvoted for it on the Betfair board. And then from that, I think he started to lose his love of it maybe, and it was time for him to move on.
So I get the premium charge. I get it. And like what I can say is, like, since I've been here at Matchbook, we've cycled through every revenue model and idea and charging system there is. And we keep tinkering. So you can create an ecosystem that works. You can create one that makes money and stuff like that. But can you create an ecosystem that's sustainable? And that's tough. And as I said, I was in the poker world for so many years on both sides, especially in the online space. And I can tell you that sustainability, when you're getting 1,000 new users every 5 minutes, because everyone's crazy about poker, you don't even have to worry about anything. But when you want to be sustainable, and this is for any gambling operator, any market,
yes.
The UK is quite mature. It's a mature market. Sustainability is tougher goal, but we're up for it.
Well, it cycles back to what we talked about earlier on. The evolution as a bettor, you need to, what works today might not work in 2 years. You need to always be looking to what you can get on. And as an operator, that's exactly probably the same as well. Maybe there was a point where everyone was streaming in and it was really easy to get new customers. But as a market like the UK matures as to where it is now, the cost to advertise to try and get new customers is very, very high. I think the Google AdWords click prices I don't know what they are, but the hundreds.
Yeah. And so what we're trying to do is just put a product up there that we think is special and people want to use. So my gambling hero, right? My absolute gambling historical hero is a guy named Benny Binion. I don't know if you've heard of him.
But
he was essentially the person who was the godfather of the American casino model, right? How to operate a casino, basically on 1% or less, Craps was the game. And this is in the 40s in Las Vegas. There's been a lot written about the 60s and the 70s and the 80s in Las Vegas, but not a lot known about the true birth of Las Vegas, which was the 40s, And Benny Binion got to Las Vegas in 1946 and opened up a no-limit craps game on the square, which had never been really done before. Everyone was about big margin or cheating or, all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that makes craps quite special from any other gambling game, casino game, at least in America, is the low margin, right? It's less than 1% if the dice are. And Benny Binion basically showed that you could build a casino. He was the first one. You can build a casino out of the desert in less than 1%. He famously said, I'm just looking to give people clean fair gamble, right? But he famously said, they asked him,
Yeah.
why don't you have a floor show? Why aren't you giving all, have all the singers in and giving people bonuses, or free rooms and that kind of thing? And he said, I'll never blow my bankroll out of a trumpeter's behind. He didn't use the word behind, but the idea is that he knew what he was up about. People need a fair gamble, and I'd like to believe, or that's my passion for being on this side of the fence in terms of operator punter.
No, that makes sense, and it shows that high volume model was working back in the 40s in the betting space.
Oh yeah, no limit. I mean, Benny Binion, he basically, was the author of, your first bet is your limit. There's tons of stories, true stories about people driving out of the desert and pulling up with a suitcase of cash and putting on the table and saying bet for their first bet. Now, look, at Matchbook, you're going to have to show that you can afford it first.
Let's talk about that. That segues us so nicely, Jesse. Thank you for doing my job. On to talking about affordability limits, because that, from an exchange point of view, has to be a challenge. Because if you've got guys who are placing big sums of money, who are seeding markets, who are mature, big bankroll gamblers, and there's potentially down the pipeline, you've got affordability limits that are going to kick in at whatever, £1,000, £2,000, whatever they might land on. How is that going to work from an exchange perspective?
First of all, I believe in affordability as a principle. I don't think there's a problem with it. I've been around gambling for a long time. I think the idea that someone should have to show that they can afford to gamble before they do it, I don't think that's wrong. Now, there's a couple arguments out there. Is it hypocritical in terms of there's other places, whether it's the stock market or another sin, or, you
crypto,
go down the lottery and you don't have to show them, but you do in gambling? I hear that. But I don't think that excuses the idea that, why in a society should we try and protect people from, or credit cards doing things that they absolutely can't afford. So I don't have a problem with that. In terms of like Matchbook, we're bound by the same UK laws that every other firm is bound by. You have to show where the money's coming from. You have to show that you can afford to gamble. Where we're a little bit different, I believe, is that we understand what your situation is like. If that's where your source of funds is from professional gambling, we understand if it's part of a strategy, if your winnings are coming from another operator or something else. And we've been able, because we have a little bit of a personal touch, and because we have a lot of customers like that, I'd say we've been able to, get comfortable, and we have to get comfortable with exactly what someone's doing. So yeah, are there people who are putting huge amounts of money through our exchange? Yes. And there's also people who are just putting, 10 pounds at a time. But all of them have to show that they can afford to do it and that the money is coming from a place where it's absolutely fine.
Yeah. And from an operator side of things on that, the amount of work involved from a customer service side to gauge someone's affordability, because this is not the 1960s anymore. People don't do a 9-to-5 job from leaving school to retirement, where they've got one wage slip per month. They've got complicated financial situations, and you've got to train staff to look at tax slips, wage slips, all kinds of investment information, assets, all this kind of stuff. That must be quite a job to scale up, especially when you're dealing with thousands and thousands of customers, to go through that on a piecemeal basis. So that's hard.
Well, first of all, I have a lot of sympathy for customers who feel like all I want to do is make a bet and I have to this and this and this and that. But what do you get? What do you get? You get a safe place to gamble. You get the absolute knowledge that you're gambling in a pool with money that everyone else can afford to. It's totally safe and it's secure. So you're getting that. Now, I know that there's some people that want to make the trade-offs and don't want to show that. And it's trade-offs. Don't get me wrong. A lot of people say, well, I can go there and I can go there. And maybe you haven't gotten hit with the hammer yet, but there's hammers. There's hammers there. Now, in terms of us, our customer service is all about that. We're really proud of them. I mean, we have a 4.6 Trustpilot rating, which is quite good. Our customer service, got nominated for industry award last year. Our compliance team is massive. We're working on it, because you know why? Because that's what it takes to be here. That's what it takes to be here. And that's what we want. As I said, I listen to Neil all the time. Neil talks a lot, but he makes a lot of sense. He makes a lot of good points. Neil Channing, yeah. Yeah, and he's a good friend of mine, right? And I'd say that there's good arguments on both sides. And I'm not from the UK, so there's a lot of stuff where I don't know all the details. But what I would say is that, like anything else, the rules need to evolve. There needs to be compromise. Nothing's in a perfect place. But I like it a lot better than some of the other conditions I see. I think the UK is a really, really good place to be the future of gambling. And I think that more places, more jurisdictions, more regions are going to move this way rather than the other. But that doesn't mean that everything's perfect.
No, so obviously we've got this white paper, which is going to, it's the draft of the future laws, what's going to, the new gambling review. Is there anything else? We talked about affordability limits. We talked about ring fencing funds. Is there anything from an operator side that you're looking for? Where is it more clarity in terms of affordability limits or some of the things? Because I do read from some bookmakers, if you like, there is a lack of understanding of some of the rules from your side of things to make sure that you comply at all times. But maybe there's other things as well that from an operator you're looking for a little bit more oversight, a little bit more help from.
We've got a big job trying to make a good product for our customers. Like we do, because it's not perfect. Trying to get liquidity in there and stuff like that.
That's more the challenge, is it, for you to try and get that rather than...
I hear about people who get raw deals or people who say, I was treated unfairly. They wanted this. I gave them this. It's not enough for them, or net deposits rather than winnings. And, I know that there's a lot. I've heard about a lot of raw deals and I sympathize with all of them. And I think, great, whatever the forum is, I'm not, as I said, that familiar with how the UK government process works. To be honest, it's a little bit of a mystery to me, the political process. I've tried to get up to speed on what a white paper is and stuff like that. At the end of the day, our focus is on making sure the rules are followed and making sure that we actually can continue to accommodate all the customers that are possible to help people get over the line. So whether that means that personal service, whether it's about someone who's not sure what they should send, call customer service. We'll talk them through it. We'll talk about your situation, try and work through with you. Someone who thinks, oh my God, if I send you this, I've compromised a lot of personal information. I don't feel comfortable with privacy. We'll work with that. We're not sharing personal details, information with anybody. We're not part of a conglomerate. Like there's nothing else. We're the exchange. That's all. So, yeah. But I hear all that. I mean, I'm a guy. I'm not comfortable giving out my phone number sometimes.
It was more just trying to understand the challenges from your side of things. We hear I talk about the punter side, but from the operator side. But that's fine.
I don't know specifically. I think, look, everything should be fair. Everybody should be bound by the same rules.
Yeah.
From my side, what I like to see is make sure that all the games and markets have integrity, so that you're not having a lot of times. Not having different rules about certain markets, about certain sports, about certain things. I'm not a big fan of novelty bets, right? Because with a novelty bet, nobody's sure. You want to put
there's a lot of inside information, isn't there? Right. I spoke to someone, my last podcast guest, who talked about that, reality TV bets, whereby it's been filmed 2 weeks ago.
My theory is that if we spread a market at Matchbook, we should be comfortable with getting half the money in the world on one side and half the money in the world on the other side, and there's going to be no problems with settlement. You maybe know about this, but like the U.S. presidential election markets a couple of years ago, it was incredible. Nobody had anticipated, with a lot of the market rules and stuff like that, how things were going to be settled. And that was quite uncomfortable. Now we had rules and we thought, that thankfully that they gave us enough integrity to settle those markets. But it was a little bit worrying for a while. And you do not like to be in that spot where there's millions of dollars on a market. And honestly, you didn't get the rules 100% right for every instance. That cannot happen. Cannot happen on a betting exchange. That cannot happen in a regulated environment.
Yeah, I remember that very clearly. And I think it took a few months I think Betfair took a while to settle that one. And even when they did, they got threatened with class action from some. I remember seeing some very funny.
We were proud of how we did it. We actually settled quite early, I think, comparatively. And we did have some good rules in place. But that was crazy stuff. And it just goes to show you, you really need to think everything through. Look, I hadn't read the Constitution like that since I was in high school. I'll promise you that.
Well, I hope you've got it ready for 2024, because I'm sure that's going to be really straightforward as well. I was also going to ask you, while we're on difficult questions, can you talk about who owns Matchbook? Is it who we think it is?
Matchbook is privately owned, so
okay.
I can't comment on that. Privately owned. But
no, I have to ask.
Yeah, but at the same time, we run our company to make money for Matchbook. And the people who have always been involved in Matchbook are people who are passionate about the same kind of things we are, which is that Matchbook should be a place where people who have felt like in the past they couldn't get a bet down, people who have felt like they didn't know where to go, they were being mistreated or whatever, that markets are there, for people to bet on and take opinions on, fair markets.
Good answer, Jesse. Diplomatic. Do you have any plans to open a sports book? Because I know obviously Betfair look at theirs quite a lot these days. That's almost the focus, and markets have their own. Matchbook's going to stick to being exchange, or?
Like when you say sports book, I hear high margin, right? I hear high margin product, and I am not a fan of. Exactly. I am not a fan of high margin products. Now, are there things about sports book experiences, the sports book experience, that people like and would like to see on an exchange? Potentially, that's like something we think about. But I'm kind of old school. Like, I do not like, now I've seen people beat high margin products, but I don't like them. I don't think that's not the dichotomy that I believe generates good gambling. What I think the dichotomy that high margin sports book generates is what you see, which is that if you have a high margin sports book, you're going to spend a lot of money getting people in, and you're going to spend a lot of money kicking people out.
Yeah.
And, you got to feed the machine. We're not Superman. We're not perfect. But our principle is to try and make it open to as many people as possible.
Oh, makes sense.
I don't believe high margin does that.
No.
I've traveled a lot in the days around when casinos were opening up. And there was a particular time in the 90s when they were opening up casinos in different Indian reservations, because of the laws in the United States.
Yeah.
And there was this one Indian reservation outside of Detroit. And basically, they opened up now because there was not really any laws. So you could basically set the slot machines to whatever you wanted to. So they'd opened up this casino in the middle of it. Was not too far from Detroit, not too far from Dearborn, not really that far from Chicago. And so it was like people just came from miles around, right? And they basically had this tin barn there. And it was just filled with slot machines. Now, they opened it up. I remember getting there because we were driving. They also had a poker room, but the poker room was here in one barn and the slot machine was there. And I was wrong. There was a line that was 3 hours line just stretched out to just get in to play. All right. So what did they do? They set the slot machine payback down to like 65% or something like that, which is basically like put a, stick up fan, right? And it didn't matter because they had such a line, so many people. I had to go in to see, obviously. I wanted to see what a 65% payback slot machine was.
How long people stayed.
They still had lines out the doors,
Yeah. But I mean, often though, it seems like the sports book equivalents are because people don't understand the exchange side of it and they're trying to cater for that. And then people like things like best odds guaranteed. And even though, like you say, as soon as you start to, the chap who in the casino you talked about before, when you start to have all of these bells and whistles to your product, it costs. And you're, as the consumer, you're the person sucking that up, aren't you? So
yeah, look, I'm not anti-sports book. I mean, I think 10-leg multiples are fun, and there's a place for them, but, the margin's going to be through the roof. So, and there's some of that bells and whistle stuff where it's a little bit more interesting. There's maybe some narrative behind it, and everybody is absolutely welcome to have their own reasons for why they gamble and how they want to do it, as long as they can afford it. So if people want that experience, it's fine. And we know, because you've had a lot of them on your show and we're all around, that there is still, even in those environments, you can still find value.
Yeah.
It's just, as I said, that dichotomy, like what you just said about somebody's got to pay for it. When X is given out, looks like they're just giving money away. Like, have you heard about what's going on in New York State? Like $2,000 first bet bonuses and stuff like that. Like, what's that about? Somebody's going to pay for it.
Yeah, I've heard about people from New Jersey driving across to take that. Yeah, there's some ridiculous offers at the moment as they all hunt for these high value players.
And that's fine, because that's the industry. But what I see going on in the U.S. is that I think that there's a need for the next stage, right? That's why I think the U.K. is a lot more mature, and that there's people who want an exchange, recognize what it can do, and want to gamble in a different way, which is frankly more sustainable. Now you can always have variance, but I believe in the number. And I know what's going to happen when you're betting $10, a roll or a bet, 10% margin versus a half.
Yeah.
One, you can have some fun, and the other, fun's not going to last as long.
No, that's a good point about the sports books and like what's happening in states like New York where they open up is obviously not going to be sustainable for either side. And I want to also ask you about the content that Matchbook produces, because what I do like about Matchbook as well is the educational side, and I think it's called your insight section, and you've got a whole host of podcasts and videos onto different sports, and you've got some really big names. I love Jonathan Wilson, the football writer. He's a novelist as well. He's written a lot. I used to listen to his Blizzard podcast. He's fantastic. So what is the thinking behind all of this quality content? It must take a lot of time and effort to put it out.
Yeah, that's nice of you to say. I am also a massive fan. Now, I'm a big fan of the NFL pods. And those actually, like, when I bet, because I've never been someone who's, probably the same in poker too, never been someone who's really been willing to put in the work. But because of that, I believe I'm always looking for people who genuinely have put in the work and have found an edge. I think you can find that on the Matchbook pods. But we're trying to show that smart betting is possible, right? That's our ethos. We want to talk about betting in a way where you can be smart. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to win. We all know that. We all know the variance and stuff like that. And sometimes the edge is gone if you don't get the price fast enough. But I think talk about betting in a smart way, and that's what we want to present. We won your Smart Betting Club.
You did, yeah. You got silver, yeah.
Thank you very much. And, I know the guys, they put a lot of time into that. We do it because we think it fits our brand. We're an exchange. We don't specifically have a direct interest where we're trying to direct you to a losing bet or a losing proposition. So we want you to be smart. I think it's for the benefit of everybody that more people take betting and think about it in a smart way. Now, you don't have to. And I could afford it at the time, have sometimes betting propositions that maybe that were a little more fun than smart.
Yeah.
But if you want to do it seriously, if you want to approach it in the fashion, and it's a great game, not just watching sports and betting on sports, but figuring out a puzzle, figuring out an angle. I think that's really attractive to a lot of people. Like the people, I was always so fascinated by someone who had found just this absolutely weird angle to make money in gambling that nobody had ever thought of before. Just like bizarre stuff, corner kicks or coin toss. You see everything, right? You hear about every different angle in the game.
Yeah, you do. It does align with what we're doing at the Smart Betting Club. They say you've got smart betting content, and obviously you educate people. If people just come and lose money, then they're likely not going to come back all too quickly. But if they come and maybe they make a bit, they lose a bit, and they're not hemorrhaging money, but maybe they're not making fortunes, they're going to stay with the exchange and try and build their experience, their knowledge, and that's great to see from the content. And like I say, it won the awards, and rightly so, because I know from this side of the fence how much time and effort must go into producing that kind of stuff. So it's a credit to you.
Also, like, I've listened to a bunch of your guests. They all have a different angle, but like what would be the absolute consistent theme is every single person puts the work.
Yeah.
No one has come and say, it's a breeze. I wake up, it's my dog's birthday, nobody says that. And one of the worst kind of, in my view, the worst kind of better potentially in the world is someone who thinks they're a little more clever than they are. You have to be serious to put the work in. And if you don't, find someone who does. And they're out there. That was, always my ethos. Seek out the people who or you can identify that they've got an edge. And now, look, for every one of those person, there's 100 people who would tell you they'll do it and are flim-flam. So it's a minefield out.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, everyone you speak to is a successful gambler. No one's a loser. Everyone's good at it. If you could look behind the curtains and see exactly what they've made or lost, profit or loss in their accounts, maybe you get a truer sense. But yes, everyone's good. Everyone's a winner. So it's always hard to gauge. Yes, like you say.
It is hard. So it's not any easier on some level than doing the work yourself. But don't believe that just because someone says that they've made money or a professional gambler, they have a winning strategy, but also don't believe it's not possible.
But like I say, it takes hard work.
But Bob Dylan once said, talk about a guy who's 1 in a million, but in New York alone, there's 8 of them.
That's a great note to wrap things up on there, Jesse. Thank you so much for spending the time. But we've rattled off a few questions and you've been good enough to answer some difficult ones too. You mentioned as well earlier on that there's some like 0% commission deals or offers for people interested in fire away.
Yeah, you can 90 days, 0% on Matchbook if you come and sign us up. But look, what I'll just say is have a look. I don't know what you heard. I believe in gambling that it's always worth a little tickle to find out what's going on, to find out if something's real or not. But even if you don't want to have a little tickle at 0%, go check out the markets and see what's there compared to what you're doing other places. We believe in our product. That's what we're trying to do. We want to help and accommodate people who are interested in that.
That sounds great. Well, it's encouraging to hear. And it's great to have someone on talking about things from your side of things and being so open and transparent. So thank you ever so much. Please definitely go check out the Matchbook Insights. Even if you don't yet go and open an account, go and watch Aidan's content, especially he'll like that.
You mentioned the soccer pods and the football pods, and I'll take your word that it's good. But I promise you will not be on the wrong side if you watch the NFL guys. There's some clever guys on the NFL pod. I like betting NFL because the markets are so big that they're quite tight. So NFL is the greatest game on earth. But I'm not going to put you off football. But yeah. Check them out. It's a good start.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever you call football, there's something for you. That's we'll summarize it like that. All right, Jesse. Thanks ever so much, mate, and appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Pete.